Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Cole. It's Sunday afternoon, July 27th, and this will be the Week 5 announcement for Political Science 1013 for the summer 2025 semester for the second 7-week schedule. All right, everybody, we're through the midterm exam now, and we're heading now for exam 3, which is going to be Monday, August 4th. Not this Monday, but Monday week. Tomorrow, Monday, being July 28th, when many of you may be looking at this message. The exam will be the following Monday, August 4th. Over 2 units, units 5 and 6 on the presidency and the executive branch. We'll try to look at unit 5 today and 6 next time. Unit 6 is a very short unit. I think what I'll do next week is talk about Unit 6, and since the exam will be coming up so early in the week, we'll get started on Unit 7 for the Supreme Court, which will be covered on the final exam. Also, everybody, our 4th discussion is going to be Thursday, July 31st and Friday, August 1st over how Trump runs the White House. You have an article to look at that I think will be quite eye-opening about what it's like in the Trump White House right now. So take a look and see what you think of that, and we'll have that discussion Thursday and Friday, July 31st and August 1st, the end of the week. Okay. All right, everybody, the exam will be Monday the 4th, units 5 and 6, plus you have 4 articles to look at, 3 about the presidency, 1 about the bureaucracy. So, once again, go ahead and try to bring those links up and let me know if there's any difficulty. There should not be, but don't leave that to the last minute. You might want to see if you can access those links and perhaps print those articles out so you'll have them in plenty of time in advance of the exam. Okay, so the exam will be the 4th. The discussion 4, will be July 31st and August 1st. Let me take our remaining time today to talk about what we try to do in Unit 5 on the presidency. We start out, we talk about the significance of the presidency in general, and we then go through recent precedents, going back 40 years or so, all the way back to President Carter, who, of course, passed away right at the end of the year last year. Now there was Carter and then Reagan, followed by Bush 41, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Bush 43, George W. Bush, and then Obama, of course, Trump, Biden, and then Trump again. So you can familiarize yourselves with those presidents and their administrations if you're not familiar with them. We try to hit the highlights of what happened in each of those presidential administrations. Now we go on to talk about presidential power under the Constitution. Powers and duties that the Constitution confers on the president. We talk about them sometimes in terms of presidential roles, or as I put it, as one political scientist described it, hats that the president wears. Some of those are conferred directly by the Constitution, the roles of Commander-in-Chief and Chief Executive. Others are expectations that have attached to the president through the years, especially in the post-World War II period, I think. The role of Chief Legislator, Chief Diplomat, Chief Economist, and of course the president will always be at the head of his or her party. So he has political as well as non-political roles and duties to fulfill. We talk a good deal also about the war power, presidential power in military and national security affairs, which we had talked about for the midterm exam under the Constitution unit when we gave you that piece to look at about presidential war power. We go back to some of that material here in Unit 5. And also impeachment. And of course, in President Trump's first term, there were 2 impeachment attempts against him, including one at the very end. Okay? And some people think if in the midterm elections the Democrats get back control of the House of Representatives, there could be yet another attempt to impeach and remove President Trump. It more than likely will not be successful because the Republicans more than likely will control the Senate, but that could come up again. And so look closely at what the constitutional provisions are for impeachment of the president. We go to some length about the presidential election process, which the Constitution attempts to address, but quite a bit of it has taken shape sometime after the drafting and ratification of the Constitution. Some things that the framers of the Constitution might not have expected or anticipated, such as the formation of political parties. Okay. There is, of course, the institution of the Electoral College. We have tended to think of it as a direct popular election, but it really works state by state. It so happened in 2016 and also the year 2000. We had a case where one candidate finished first in the popular vote, but the other candidate won the election in the Electoral College, which is really what counts. So take a close look and see how that works. The process will get well underway along about the time of the midterm election. It may even be underway by then, but certainly in the aftermath of the midterm election, we'll at that point be 2 years away. And the process will be well underway at that point. Delegates have to be selected to the 2 party conventions, which will take place in the summer before the election. And they're the ones, that's where the presidential candidates formally are nominated. The delegates are selected in the primaries and caucuses beginning in the very beginning of the presidential election year in January. Most states use primaries to select their delegates to the national conventions for each party. And you have to get a majority of the delegates to be nominated. So we have a phase of the process that involves the selection of the delegates, and that really will start to get underway immediately after the midterm election. Then once we get into the presidential election year in January of 28, we'll have the primaries and caucuses. The delegates will be selected. The conventions will be held. The major party candidates nominated. And then the election will take place in November of 2028. Everyone, the last time around, it really worked out in quite an unusual way because Joe Biden and Donald Trump were such solid front runners. There was not really much competition for either one of them in the Democratic and Republican primaries and caucuses. Biden, of course, felt compelled to drop out a couple of weeks after that debate performance in which I've mentioned he sort of had a senior moment and raised questions about whether he was still up for the job. And Kamala Harris ended up inheriting most all of his delegates, and she won the nomination, as we know, went on to lose the election. All right, so that in a nutshell is how the presidential election process works. We move on to look at presidential power. Okay. What if the president has a bill that the president supports and is trying to get that bill through Congress, much as in the way President Trump did with the recent so-called Big Beautiful Bill? They gave that name formally to the act, the Big Beautiful Bill Act, because he kept calling it that. And they finally named the bill that way. What are resources that the president has to get members of Congress to vote the way the president wants them to get a bill passed? Well, there are several things. Most important of all would be, number one, members of the president's own party, his co-partisans, as I call them. Okay. And furthermore, presidential popularity. That works especially strongly in favor of President Trump right now, because the situation seems to be that Republicans are afraid of lifting a finger against President Trump. Several people who have done so have ended up either not running for re-election, withdrawing, or getting beaten when President Trump supported a challenger to them in the Republican primary. So it's a very, very difficult thing to do right now for any Republican to push back against President Trump because he is so popular, especially with the so-called MAGA base. And so that makes him quite powerful, at least for the time being. All right. We go on to discuss not just the president, but the presidency, the apparatus around the president to support the president, which consists largely of, I don't know, a few hundred or a couple of thousand people, many of whom work for bureaucratic entities that are directly responsible to the president. There's, of course, the White House staff, and there's such positions as the chief of staff and the press secretary. And we talk about the people who are holding those positions at this time. Then there are bodies such as the Office of Management and Budget, the National Security Council, and a couple of others that you will see discussed. Okay, so it's a big and powerful enough office that we have to have apparatus around the president, not just the president him or herself. The president needs help. A presidential commission decided way back, I believe in the middle of World War II. So there's quite a bureaucratic apparatus around the president. And then finally, there's the matter of the cabinet. And we mentioned that the cabinet is not as important in our system as it is in a system like the British system. So take a look at why we say that. Now, President Trump has made some effort to publicize his cabinet meetings. He will bring TV cameras in and go around and call on the cabinet secretaries one by one, and they will talk about what's going on in their department, and very often will applaud what the president has done. Well, that makes the cabinet maybe a little more prominent than it's been in the past. But traditionally we have said that it's not something that's as important in our system as it is in a system like the British system, and you'll see that discussed at the very end of those Unit 5 class notes. All right, everybody, that will do it for this week. Discussion on Thursday and Friday, the 31st and the 1st. And the next exam, Exam 3, coming up on Monday the 4th, and I will be talking to you before then in about a week's time. We'll try to get you in shape and get you ready for Exam 3 on Monday, August 4th. Take it easy, study hard. Contact me as needed through the course website or at david.cole@opsu.edu.